Today's content. No one told me that after giving birth, you might not want to live one. Introduction. The confession no one dares to say. I don't want to die. But there are days when I don't want to live either. That sentence was never uttered aloud. It only repeated itself in my head, on very late nights, when the whole family was asleep, and I sat silently in the darkness. In my arms was a newborn baby. In my heart was an unnamed emptiness. No one told me that after giving birth, there might be times when you look at your child and feel nothing at all. Not because you don't love your child, but because you yourself are so exhausted that you are no longer capable of feeling. Your body is there, doing everything, but your mind seems to have left long ago. People say motherhood is instinct, that once you give birth, love will naturally appear. But no one talks about those moments when you ask yourself, what if I disappear? Not because you want to hurt anyone, but because you're so tired you no longer have the strength to exist in this role. You still take care of your child. You still breastfeed, change diapers, rock them to sleep. You still smile when people look. And because of that, no one realizes that inside you are quietly falling apart. This confession isn't scary because it's dark, but because it's so real. Because so many mothers have thought this way, but didn't dare say it out loud. They were afraid of being judged, afraid of being seen as selfish, afraid of being considered a bad mother. If you're listening to these words and see yourself in them, know that you're not alone. And the fact that you're here, even if only to listen, is already a huge effort. Prenatal expectations. Motherhood will be happiness. Before giving birth, I believed that motherhood would be a natural form of happiness. No learning required, no extensive preparation needed, just give birth, and everything would automatically fall into place. I was surrounded by beautiful stories. People talked about the moment they first heard their child cry, about the feeling of holding their child in their arms and their heart overflowing, about a love so great it could endure all hardship. These stories were told with smiles, with stunning photos, with congratulations. From now on, your life will turn a new page. No one said that this new page might be very dark. Throughout my pregnancy, I was prepared for childbirth, but not for losing myself. I learned how to breathe in pain. I learned how to care for a newborn. But no one taught me how to cope with the feeling of no longer being the center of my own life. No one told me that there might come a day when I wouldn't recognize myself in the mirror. Society paints a very clear picture of the happy mother. Always gentle, always sacrificing, always grateful for her children. And when you don't feel that way, you start to doubt yourself. You think there must be something wrong with you. Maybe you don't love your child enough. Maybe you're selfish. But the truth is, that expectation is too high, and people aren't allowed to get tired of it. After giving birth, I realized that motherhood isn't just another role. It's a total transformation. Your body, hormones, your rhythm of life, your relationships, and even how you see yourself. You're not just taking care of a baby. You're living in a state of prolonged sleep deprivation, constant interruptions, no personal space, no time for proper recovery. But all people ask is the baby well behaved? Few ask, are you okay? The expectation that being a mother will bring happiness makes postpartum pain even more dangerous, because when you're unhappy, you're silent. You try to play your role. You smile. You tell yourself that just a little more effort and everything will be all right. But inside, you're slowly running out. There's something very few people talk about. Postpartum happiness doesn't always come immediately. For many, it comes very late. And for some, it comes after experiencing feelings of emptiness, confusion, and even regret. That doesn't make them bad mothers. It just shows they're human. Prenatal expectations aren't wrong, but they're incomplete. They lack the truth that motherhood can be both loving and a loss. It can be both meaningful and a crisis. And those two things can coexist in the same person. If you ever thought you'd be happier after having a child, but the reality turned out to be quite different, please remember, you're not broken. You haven't strayed from your path. You're just experiencing a very real part of a journey that too few people dare to talk about. When the thought, I don't want to live, appears, that thought doesn't come as a shock. It's not loud, not dramatic. It comes very slowly, very quietly, and usually appears when you're most tired. It's not, I want to die, but rather, I don't want to wake up anymore. If only today didn't have to start. If only I could disappear for a while. You still do everything you need to do. You still take care of your children. You still complete the minimum tasks to get through the day. But inside, you no longer feel alive. You are just existing, from one hour to the next. The hardest thing to say is, you may still love your children very much. And that's why the thought, I don't want to live, frightens you even more. You wonder how a mother can think like that. You feel ashamed. You're afraid of your own thoughts. And you decide not to tell anyone. That thought often arises when the body has been pushed beyond its limits. When sleep deprivation is prolonged. When there's no time to recover. When all personal needs are put aside, day after day. When you're no longer seen as a person, but only as a role. It also arises when you feel you have no choice. You're not allowed to be tired. You're not allowed to complain. You're not allowed to be weak. You have to keep going, because you're a mother. And that pressure to be strong drains you faster. There are days when you don't cry. You're not visibly sad. You just feel empty. Everything happens around you but doesn't touch you. Joy can't get in. Sadness can't escape. You stand in the middle, trapped in a state that's hard to name. And then that thought comes. What if I'm not here anymore? Not to hurt the child. Not to evade responsibility. It's simply because you're too tired to continue carrying it all alone. Many mothers have been in this state but don't know what to call it. They think they're weak, that they're not good enough, that others can do it. Why can't they? They compare themselves to the images of happy mothers out there and conclude that the problem lies within themselves. But the truth is, the thought of not wanting to live doesn't define who you are. It defines that you're overwhelmed. That your support system is inadequate. That your body and mind are crying out for help in the only way they can. The most dangerous thing isn't the thought itself. It's believing you have to endure it alone. There's a fine line between thinking and being consumed by thoughts. And when you're in a state of exhaustion, that line blurs. That's why being heard, being acknowledged, and being able to speak out safely is so important. If you've ever had those thoughts, please know this. You're not abnormal. You're not broken. You're not a bad mother. You're a human being under immense pressure during a very vulnerable period of your life. And what you need isn't cheer up, advice, but presence. Someone to ask if you're okay, and genuinely wait for your answer. A space where you're allowed to speak without judgment. The thought of not wanting to live isn't the end of the story. For many, it's the first sign that it's time for help. And recognizing that, even late, is a crucial step towards staying alive. Dangerous silence. Silence doesn't come right away. It builds up gradually, little by little, as you realize that speaking out doesn't make things easier. Sometimes it even makes you feel worse. The first time you try to speak, it might just be a very gentle sentence. I'm so tired. But the answer you get is, every mother is tired. You take a step back. The second time, you want to say that you feel so empty, so lost. But you hear somewhere, having a child is happiness. What's there to be sad about? You take another step back. And then you learn to be silent. That silence isn't because you have nothing to say. It's because you gradually come to believe that what you're feeling is wrong. That you have no right to complain. That your pain isn't justified enough compared to having a healthy child in your arms. Society allows postpartum women to be tired, but it doesn't allow them to break down. It's acceptable to complain about back pain, lack of sleep, or hair loss. But if you say you feel empty, hopeless, or no longer want to exist in this role, the atmosphere immediately changes. People become flustered, they avoid the topic, or they rush to reassure you, as if your emotions need to be suppressed as quickly as possible. So you remain silent, so as not to make anyone uncomfortable. This silence is dangerous because it makes you feel lonely even when surrounded by many people. You might be in a house full of children's laughter, but there's no space for your emotions. You begin to live in isolation. Outwardly you continue to function, but inwardly you shrink further and further. Silence also makes you doubt yourself. When no one confirms that your feelings are real, you begin to think that perhaps you're exaggerating. That just a little more effort would be enough. That speaking out would only worry everyone, and wouldn't help at all. But suppressed emotions don't disappear. They just change how they manifest. They appear as prolonged insomnia, as unwarranted irritability, as inexplicable fatigue, and sometimes, as terrifying thoughts that you dare not admit to anyone. There's something few people talk about. Many mothers aren't in danger because they're weak, but because they've been silent for too long. They've been too good at holding on. They've become accustomed to handling everything alone, until they can no longer bear it. Silence is also dangerous because it's praised. A mother who endures well, doesn't complain, cares for her child wholeheartedly, is often seen as strong. But no one sees the price paid for that strength, the gradual erosion from within. You don't need a speech to break this silence. Sometimes, just the right question, "Are you okay?" is enough, and the person asking is truly willing to listen to the answer, even if it's not pleasant. If you are silent, please know this: silence is not your obligation. You don't owe anyone stability by sacrificing yourself. Speaking up doesn't make you a weak mother. It just shows you're trying to protect your own life. Silence may seem safe, but being listened to is what keeps you going. This is not weakness, it's overload. There's a very familiar question many new mothers ask themselves: why can't I endure it like everyone else? That question sounds reasonable, but it's wrong from the start. Because what you're going through isn't a measure of strength or weakness. It's a sign of overload, a state any human being can fall into when burdened with too much at once, for too long, without enough support. After giving birth, your body hasn't had time to recover, yet your mind is already working non-stop. Hormones are changing drastically, sleep is fragmented, your body aches, and at the same time, you're given a huge responsibility to keep another life alive, safe, and thriving. No shifts off, no days off, no real quiet time. When a person becomes overwhelmed, the mind seeks to conserve energy. It does this by shutting off emotions, narrowing thoughts, and sometimes creating feelings of emptiness or despair. This isn't your fault, it's a survival response. The problem is that society often calls this response by a different name: weakness. We're used to hearing things like, "Cheer up, all mothers go through this. You'll get used to it. It was harder back then." Those statements aren't bad, but they inadvertently deny your personal experience. They make you believe that if you can't handle it, the fault lies with you, not with the overwhelming circumstances. The truth is, loving your child doesn't make you immune to burnout. Great responsibility doesn't automatically generate unlimited endurance. And feeling overwhelmed doesn't mean you're not good enough. It just shows you've been carrying on for too long without support. There's a very common misconception that postpartum depression is just sadness. But for many, it's a series of small signals: persistent fatigue, difficulty concentrating, irritability, a disconnect from oneself. And when these signals are ignored, when the body is forced to be okay, they accumulate. No one can sustain themselves in a prolonged state of emergency. Sadly, many mothers only allow themselves to stop when they've hit rock bottom. When their bodies stop cooperating. When their minds can no longer hide. When terrifying thoughts begin to surface. And at that point, they blame themselves even more. But if you look back fairly, you'll see, you didn't break because you were weak. You broke because you had to do too much alone. You didn't lack willpower. You lacked support, understanding, and the space to be a person, not just a mother. Perhaps the most important thing to say here is, you don't have to wait until you're completely broken down to ask for help. Recognizing that you're overwhelmed isn't a failure. It's a self-protective skill. When you correctly identify your situation, things start to change. You stop blaming yourself. You stop comparing yourself to the ideal mother. You start asking the right questions. What am I carrying? And what can be shared? This isn't a quick way, but it's the real way. And it begins with a crucial truth. You're not weak. You're just carrying too much at once, during a time when you should be receiving more care than ever before. The moment of realization: I need help. That moment rarely comes as a clear decision. It's not when you sit down and confidently say, "I need help." Often, it comes later, more vaguely, and very quietly. Maybe it's a morning when you can't get out of bed, even though the child is crying right beside you. Not because you don't care, but because your body no longer obeys your commands. Maybe it's when you realize you haven't genuinely smiled in a long time. Or it's when a fleeting thought makes you jump. I can't go on like this. Realizing you need help is difficult because it goes against everything you've been taught. You're used to fending for yourself, used to bracing, used to being the one in charge. And admitting that you're not okay feels like letting go of something very important. Many mothers aren't afraid to help. They're afraid of becoming a burden. They're afraid that if they speak up, people will be disappointed. Afraid of being looked down upon. Afraid of being seen as weak. Afraid that they will no longer be trusted with the role of motherhood. These fears make them hesitate, even though they know they're reaching their limit. The moment of realizing, "I need help," is sometimes not a collapse, but a very deep exhaustion. An exhaustion that cannot be compensated for with sleep, cannot be ignored, cannot be cured by familiar words of encouragement. You realize that if you continue to remain silent, the price to pay will be even greater. It's important to clarify, needing help doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're listening to the signals of your body and mind. It means you're aware enough to realize that humans aren't designed to endure everything alone, especially during a fragile period like the postpartum. But the first step is often small. It's not about finding a big solution right away. It might just be saying to a safe person, "I'm not okay." No lengthy explanations, no justifications, just saying the truth. And sometimes, the other person's reaction isn't perfect. They might be flustered, they might not know what to say. But the fact that you broke the silence is a significant change. It creates a gap, a space for air to enter. There are people who realize they need help when they hear the right question, at the right time. A question that doesn't rush to fix things, doesn't try to reassure. Simply, "What are you going through?" And for the first time in a long time, you don't have to respond with a smile. Recognizing that you need help also means accepting an uncomfortable truth. You can't go back to how things were by trying harder. The only way to move on is to change, even if it's very slow, even if it's very small. That could be asking someone to babysit so you can get a good night's sleep. It could be talking to a professional. It could be allowing yourself to be okay without blaming yourself. There's no right way to seek help. Only the way it works for you, at this moment. The moment you realize you need help doesn't make you smaller. On the contrary, it's a quiet turning point. A place where you stop fighting alone and begin to allow yourself to be lifted. And sometimes, just realizing that you don't have to do it all alone anymore, is a huge relief. The small path to staying. Not everyone finds hope in a brilliant way. For many new mothers, hope doesn't come like a light at the end of the tunnel. It comes very small, very slowly, and sometimes, it's just enough to stay one more day. The path to staying isn't about complete healing. It doesn't require you to be more positive, stronger, or more grateful. It simply begins with something very humble, allowing yourself to exist in the present moment, without self-condemnation. There are days when your greatest success is simply waking up. There are other days, just feeding your baby, then sitting down to breathe. And there are days when you do nothing but not disappear. That's enough. Many people think that to continue living, they need to rediscover a greater meaning. But when you're exhausted, the big questions become a burden. What am I living for? Can be too heavy. Instead, the small path often begins with very simple questions. Where can I be a little lighter today? Is there anything I don't need to strain anymore? Staying alive sometimes means learning to break down time. Not a lifetime, not the future. Just this morning, just this 10 minutes, just the next breath. When you stop looking so far ahead, the pressure lessens a little. There's an important truth. You don't need to feel alive to deserve to live. You don't need to be grateful for every moment. You don't need to be motivated. Your presence here doesn't need a grand reason. It just needs to be allowed. The small path also includes rebuilding very basic connections. A friend you can text anytime. A professional who listens without judgment. A community where you don't have to explain too much. You don't need a lot of people. Just enough security so you don't have to pretend. Sometimes, staying put is about learning to set boundaries, with others, and with yourself. Not every piece of advice needs to be heard. Not every expectation needs to be met. There are times when protecting your remaining energy is more important than pleasing anyone. This path also allows for setbacks. Some days you think you're better, then the next day you sink again. That doesn't erase what you've tried. Recovery isn't a straight line. It's a series of very small steps forward, interspersed with days of stopping. And if there's one thing that needs to be repeated many times, it's this. You don't have to walk this path alone. Staying put isn't a test of resilience. It's a journey that needs support, whether from people, from expertise, or from kind choices you make for yourself. Perhaps today, the only thing you can do is watch this entire video. Perhaps you're not ready to speak out, not ready to make any big changes. But the fact that you're still here, still listening, still searching for a small path, that says that somewhere deep inside, you're still trying to live. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Just stay. The rest can come later. Conclusion. A message to mothers thinking, if only I could disappear. If you are thinking like that, if only I could disappear, please stop here for a moment. Not to blame yourself, not to find answers, just to breathe. That thought doesn't mean you're a bad mother. It just means you've been tired for a very long time. So tired that no words are gentle enough to describe it. You're not selfish. You're not broken. You're not wrong to feel that way. Many mothers have had that thought, but they don't say it out loud. They live on in silence, carrying the guilt, until they forget that they themselves are human beings who need care. If you hear these words today and see yourself in them, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're trying to live through a very difficult situation. You don't need to disappear to get rest. You don't need to leave to prove anything. You're allowed to need help. You're allowed to be not okay. You're allowed to stay, even if you don't see why. If things are too heavy right now, remember, you don't have to carry it all at once. Just stay one more day. Just don't disappear. The rest can come later, with help, with time, with people who will listen. And if no one has told you this yet, let me say it. Your existence, with all its imperfections, is still valuable. Not because you are a mother, but because you are you.